I learned a lot more about the importance of growing a business is not about your talent. It's about finding talented people and putting them into powerful systems.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Empire Life podcast. I'm Allison Ramsey, your host. I'm the founder of Empire Life, and we're a company that mentors and coaches female founders from all around the world in scaling their online empires. And today I'm with Ali Schwanke, and she is the founder of Simple Strats, and she also hosts HubSpot Hacks on YouTube. It's a video show where they go in detail all about HubSpot and getting businesses set up there. And I'll hand it over to her to intro herself a little bit more.
Yeah, thanks, Allison. It is definitely a place where if folks are using HubSpot as a tool in their business, we teach them everything from how to use the platform to some things they should know and kind of quick hacks and tricks there. And I'm excited to be on the show today as connecting with other female founders.
Amazing. Now I'm going to dive right in, Ali. It was also Allison, but she goes by Ali. We just learned that in the green room. That's amazing. And what are some of the challenges, Ali, that you feel like you've overcome in the course of your business? And how did you overcome these? And how did they benefit you and make you feel stronger, in the long term?
Sure. I think everybody encounters challenges at different stages in their journey. And I was fortunate enough to work for someone before I started my business. So if you happen to be in that state now where you're working for someone and you want to start your own business, really taking note of what would I do differently? What do I like? What do I not like? And I had some of those, we'll call them preconceived notions. And then once you become your own boss and your own, you own a business, you realize why some of those things were actually necessary. So I'd say some of the initial challenges were just really getting out of the gate and saying, I think that I want to do this, and then finding out that that isn't quite as straightforward as, one would have thought. Challenges, depending on where you are in your business, you're going to go from what I would call like little tiny baby challenges. So my first couple ones were like, okay, I had a non-compete with a previous employer and they thought that maybe that was something that I was violating. So if that was the case, like I'd never been in part of that, situation before. So that was challenge one. Now it's like, okay, well, that I understand why that was an issue, but non-competes are difficult to enforce. So if I don't know now what I know then, what I know now, I would realize that it's probably just a legal bump in the road. Secondly, I learned a lot more about the importance of growing a business is not about your talent. It's about finding talented people and putting them into powerful systems. And then that's actually the way you grow and scale. It's not so much about being the smartest in the room. It's about finding people to then bring that collective wisdom up. So challenge, I'd say, getting over myself and realizing that, the power of growing a business is really with people.
Realize being smart or starting to understand how to be smart, not necessarily the smartest person in the room or I can do everything myself, because I'm sure you can, but being smart about hiring and reading people and learning how to make that team.
Yeah, definitely. I think challenges when I was hiring people, I've gone from, and I have a business partner as well. And so finding that business partner was something that happened a year into my this business that I currently own. So I started by myself and didn't realize, you just don't know what you don't know in the beginning. And I didn't realize the benefit of having a business partner. And I think now, like seeing that we're kind of yin and yang, and he's a very specific type of personality and I'm a very specific other type of personality, and we mesh well. So not realizing some of those things in the initial stages, I'd encountered obstacles that, obviously just needed somebody else in that scenario versus just me trying to solve it by myself.
Wow, that's really fascinating because sometimes we think, is this a good idea to have a business partner or not? Because then we need to probably share certain responsibilities and also revenue and really rely on that person. And is this a person we can truly rely on that's going to follow through, or are they going to stay for the long term, with the company?
Yeah, definitely.
I'm sure those are all concerns that a lot of people have when they're thinking about that.
Yeah, for sure.
And I want to head on to the next question, Ali. What do you feel like, or do you feel like entrepreneurs need a morning routine? And if yes, what can you tell us about yours?
Yeah, I think that I've researched every morning routine on the face of the earth. There's a book by, I think it's Hal Elrod. I think that's his name, but he wrote The Miracle Morning, which I really appreciate that methodology. It's his acronym is SAVERS. So it's you're you're doing some visualizations, you're doing some affirmations, you're doing some meditation, you're doing exercise, you're drinking a glass of water. All those things are really important. And I think the further I get along, like in both entrepreneurship and I'll say like I have 2 kids. So I love the idea of a morning routine. And I also love the idea of like no one interrupting me ever. And that's just not, that's not realistic. So I have 2 kids, I have 2 pets, 2 dogs and 2 cats. So in the morning, we just call it the zoo. Like it's just the zoo, like it's the kids and the pets and whatever. But I really think that the morning routine is more about intentionality. And I think all entrepreneurs have to have an intentionality. So in the morning, if it's, for me, what's working now is what is one thing I must get done before I check my email, before I do anything else? Like what is that kind of, Brian Tracy talks about, eat the frog. What is the big thing that in my brain, I've been making it out to be this like terrible, like arduous task. And then I sit down when my brain is fresh. I've had my cup of coffee, I've had some water, and I've kind of woken up and I go, that only took me, 20 minutes. Why was I putting that off for 2 weeks? So I think for me, the morning routine is definitely more about setting yourself up for success the rest of the day, but not having this like super regimented thing because my life just doesn't allow for that.
Yeah, that we're about to get a dog actually. So probably when this airs, we'll have a dog. I have a teenager, we have 1 child, but there's always something going on. She's extremely active and social and sporty. And then my own business and lots of hours. So I definitely understand what you mean. I also focus on what is the one thing I need to do for me that's going to set me up for success. So I think we're saying, like reiterating or saying the same thing that you were saying about having a cup of coffee or some water, starting to wake up a little bit. And for me, it's also, I've been incorporating stretching and some yoga and push-ups and crunches because I can start doing that again. So I broke my leg playing volleyball actually with my daughter. The sprains my ankle severely and the leg bone snapped playing volleyball outside, and I fell into a hole, or one of my legs went into a hole in the grass. And so I'm finally getting back to being able to work out. But I noticed that even stretching leads me to feel strong and also relaxed in my body, comfortable in my own skin going into the day. So it sets me up for success. If I'm not able to do it in the morning, that's all right too. I still can incorporate that at night and it helps me sleep better. But I prefer to do it so that I don't have to think about it. Oh, I still need to do that thing, or I still need to work out. I like to knock it out first thing when I get back from dropping off the kiddo.
Yeah, I used to have I guess I worked for someone who would say, start your day on purpose. And I was young at the time and didn't have any idea what he meant by that. I thought that sounded really kind of just far-fetched. Like, of course I'm starting my day. How would I not start on purpose? Like, I don't start my day on accident. And the further I've gotten in my career, the more I've realized that starting on purpose means having that like forward-looking view at what you want out of the day, how you want to feel. Again, back to that, like your mind becomes an internal mechanism to display what happens with your body in the outward world. So if you don't spend your time setting your brain to start the day on purpose, you don't have it laid out in advance, you actually end up reacting to the day. So there are days that I catch myself doing that, and I kick myself for not setting myself up better in the morning.
Right. That's so true. Because if we're having chaos or running around, and I remind me and my family too, it's like, it's okay, slow down. Mm-hmm. We've no need to run here and there. Like, you'll get there, not driving fast. Like, coming back to center and reminding ourselves, like, it's okay, we'll get there, or we'll get that thing done. If I rush, the other day I was trying to rush doing something. We were running out the door to take my daughter to volleyball practice, and I did something where I spilled water all over the counter. So it ended up taking me like 5 more minutes, because then I had to move everything off the counter, and then some things got wet and I had to lay them out to dry that weren't supposed to get wet. And then ended up, the counter was really clean. Like, why did I do that? I could have taken a deep breath and finished the task in half the time if I would have just slowed down a little bit. And it's a great reminder.
Yeah, absolutely.
to set ourselves up for on purpose or for purpose and take our time. And what do you do when you feel any kind of resistance come up?
Yeah, this is actually something I've been battling lately. And that is, so if you've ever worked in sales, and those of us that sell as part of when you own a business, you're inherently in sales, at least at some point in your journey, whether or not that's new or maybe that's something you enjoy. There is going to be resistance because not everybody is going to buy. So there's always resistance there. And then there's resistance with, if you have a service business, clients, if you have a product business, customers. I think part of my challenge over the years has been trying to think that there's this world where resistance doesn't exist. Everything's going to, someday I'm going to feel like this is easy. And going back to that perception, if your perception is resistance is merely feedback that you need to process, and at that point in time, if resistance is no to the sales process, okay, is it merely a matter of numbers where I just need 10 more meetings to get to a yes? Mm-hmm. Or is there something here that we actually need to examine that's causing this resistance and we need to address it? So I think as I've been working through this myself lately, it's why am I feeling this way? What is the root problem of this? And then how do I create, to use the words of David Allen, who wrote Getting Things Done, how do I create a next step that will help me feel like I have control over this resistance instead of being controlled by it? So that's how I've been thinking about it lately.
Mm-hmm. I love the next step. That's a great point. There's some examples that come up for me when you said that. I haven't read that book, but maybe sending the message that you're worried to send to somebody about a business deal or JV partnership or someone. I got some new clothes the other day that were from a sustainable bamboo company that's run by women. And I've been just loving wearing bamboo clothes. And now everybody in the family wears them mostly. And I would really love them to be a sponsor too on the podcast, because I want all the women to know about it. And it's also UV protectant, because I can put one on the long sleeves and I don't have to worry about in the car, when I'm driving to or outside. And I didn't know all these things about bamboo before. And I reached out to them, and it took about 5 months maybe for them to get back to me. And now they're going to be on the podcast.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes you got to wait it out.
Yeah. And I guess I was kind of boring like that. I didn't see it as I was going up against resistance. It was more just I shouldn't ask. Let's just see how this goes, right? Like you're saying, or that next step, that's a very intuitive process for me. Not necessarily I need to I guess focus on it. It's just okay, I'll just send this message and hopefully they'll answer, or if it's not a good fit, then someone else will be a good fit.
Yeah, there's a TED Talk that I love. Resistance and rejection aren't necessarily the same thing, but sometimes our body processes them the same. But there's a TED Talk about, I can't think of the gentleman's name, but he did 100 Days of Rejection was his blog. So he did something every day to get him rejected so he'd get used to that feeling. And what the surprising result of his 100 days, so spoiler alert, if you want to watch the video, it's really funny. But spoiler alert is he ended up asking for things that he thought crazy. And more times than not, he got a yes. So how many things are we missing out on by simply not asking because we're afraid of that resistance or that rejection? And so again, if you haven't watched that TED Talk, I would highly recommend going and searching for it, because it just gives you kind of this renewed sense of okay, there is supposed to be resistance in life. And I am probably, if you're not feeling enough resistance, you're probably not actually doing risky enough things.
That's a great point too. And I think to build on that, it also means that your resilience is going to increase, because the more you go forward, then you would be building that muscle or building that resilience. And I was trying to think of another example. My daughter and I were in Athleta a few years ago, and I saw all these pictures about women empowerment all around the store. And I just had this intuitive feeling, maybe I'll just ask a manager and see if they do sponsorships for female-owned businesses. And they said yes.
Wow.
And they sponsored me for a few years. And every event I had, I could go and get a whole outfit
Oh, wow.
Shirt and pants, and then like a few flyers that I would hand out at my events. I was having, before COVID, I was having in-person events about once or twice a month, and to generate more business and women getting to know each other in the community and women speaker panels. And I'd be like, yeah, this feels so good. You know, this shirt is from Athleta because they sponsor me. I was just asking. And they were like, actually, yeah, we have money in the budget where we were just waiting for somebody to ask.
Nice. I love it.
Yeah. Do you have some examples of that that you incorporated it?
Yeah, even right now, the ability to reach out and have partnerships with content and things like that, like the things I've learned lately as far as LinkedIn and Twitter, even where people are, I think, and this is one of the points I was going to mention later, but people are so anxious about all of the AI tools and artificial intelligence that it's actually creating a lot of opportunity for this genuine human connection. And when you get it used to be like we would see an email that came out from somebody and be like, oh, an email, yay. And now we're like, oh my gosh, I don't know this person. This email's not personalized. Go away. And so if you just literally introduce a small bit of human connection. So if we didn't know each other and I went to connect with you on LinkedIn and I said, hey, it looks like you're based in Texas. I was just in Texas last week for a soccer tournament. Like we were at this complex and all of a sudden you go, ding, 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 not a robot. This person has something to share and now we have a shared connection. So I think that like element in today's world is so powerful that I've noticed by just DMing someone and being like, hey, I'd love to see if you and I could work together on this project. And normally I'd be like, oh, they don't know me. But the fact that I just asked and I asked in a genuine human way, now these relationships are coming together. So I think you're totally spot on.
It's true. Yeah. Like it could be in person or online about going up to someone and saying, hey, this is who I am. This is what I do. Like, I'm not sure how we can support each other. I want to put that out there.
Yeah, I do have a story when I did that once and it was completely like, I have a couple of those where, you know, you crash and burn. And at the time you're kind of like, oh my gosh, I want to crawl under a rock. But now it's a story that I think like is a good lesson. So I followed this guy online before podcasting was kind of pretty big. Listened to his podcast, was at this conference, found him. I was going to launch a podcast. Super excited about the title. And I sat down like next to him. I was like, hey, my name's Ali. And he's like, what are you doing here at the conference? And I said, I'm here because I want to launch a podcast. This was like 10 years ago. And he says, what's the name of it? And I still laugh thinking about this. I told him the name and he goes, you mean like, and he pulls up the podcast on his phone that his best friend, who's this like giant celebrity guy, runs with the exact name that I wanted to name my podcast. And so my lesson here is like a quick Google search can save you from a ton of embarrassment because that was stupid. Why did I not Google search to see if someone else had that podcast name before I went around like telling everybody? And then secondly, like I just look like a complete idiot and I excused myself pretty quickly, hoping that he didn't remember who I was. But
no.
I mean, it's laughable because now when I'm in a position where people are coming to me as a marketing professional saying, hey, we want to do this, and they get really excited. And my first question is, have you researched this? And they're like, well, and I said, let me tell you a story. And so that story helps me kind of break down that barrier and say, I was once stupid like this. Let me help prevent you from making the same mistake.
I love that for sure. And it gives them a reference point because somebody might decide on a name and there might be a company that's similar, that has a similar name, and it's still okay, though. That market research, that's part of all of our programs. And I've often referred to it like eating your vegetables. You know, when your parents tell you you have to eat your peas, which you hate them, or green beans, you have to eat everything on your plate. You got to eat your vegetables.
Yeah, because you get the market research wrong, and you might as well just not do the rest of it, you know, if your market research is wrong.
Yeah. And ask people, well, what do you think about this price? And is there something else I'm missing? Would you pay this for this service? Would you like to go through it and maybe pay this much? Just so many questions that we have those kind of people in our ecosystems online that we can actually ask. Or what did you think about this graphic? Like some clients, when they had a podcast coming out, or they were going to launch a podcast, and I was guiding them on that, and it ended up being like number 1 or number 2 that week, and they had so many listens. They at first asked, what do you think about this graphic? And they said it was too polished. in the market research. And so they had something, they changed it to where it was more like kind of laid back, and it was a couples podcast, and they were sitting on a couch together with their dogs or with their animals. And the other one, they were on a boat and like holding each other with a suit and a really nice dress. And some of the people said, I just don't really relate to that. Like, I'm not often on a yacht, like I love it and it's beautiful, but to listen and to be able to take information from it, it also has to be something I can relate to and feel personalized to me, like you were saying. And I want to move on to the next one. It's kind of similar to resistance and how you handle negativity when that comes up.
Yeah, negativity is a mindset, full stop. And so a couple of friends of mine introduced me to a book called Mindset. It's written by Carol Dweck, and she's a professor, but she writes the book simply just to help understand the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. And I will say that so there's this phenomenon that we think we know something because we've been exposed to it. And that's actually one of the problems with our society is we think we know a lot of things because we simply heard about them. But I'd heard about fixed versus growth. And what I realized was I was interpreting it as an all or nothing. And so you can become fixed or growth mindset based on the circumstances that you're in. So if you happen to have for instance, I had quite a few challenging experiences as a child, being bullied and things like that. So if I enter a situation where I'm feeling like the external pressures are forcing almost like a bullying type of feeling on me, I can enter this fixed mindset because it's simply a preservation of myself. It's like, okay, you can't hurt me. I'm going to go here. But as an adult, that's unhealthy. So that book really helped me identify the places that I'm struggling with negativity and how negativity is a feeling that emerges from something much deeper. And so like when I get negative, it's not that I never get negative, like had an experience last week where that happened, but I'm recognizing it now more than I did back then. And I'm also trying to understand the root cause of that so that it doesn't become a recurring problem. So support networks are really important. Talking about it's important, but also realizing like no matter how great your mindset is, it's going to try and creep in, and you have to identify it and attack it before it becomes, more of you.
That's true. I know sometimes I might just lay on the carpet, lay on the floor and do some deep breathing and stretching. Or other times, if I'm not able to stretch or do deep breathing, I might ask myself, but what's the worst that could happen by doing this? There's that, I don't have it very often, but also for maybe sometimes people around me, I might be like, that's kind of doom and gloom, let's think about. I think that question kind of centers it. Well, what's the worst that could happen in this situation?
I think that the worst case scenario, like hardly ever happens, right? But I was at a parent meeting last night for my son's soccer team, and I'll reference something that he said, which was, I thought, like, just mind-blowing for me to think about these terms. He said, surround yourself with people who will be wings instead of weights. And I thought that was a good visual. So like, a wing is going to be people that lift you up, and a weight is going to be people that drag you down. So when you're looking at like why you might be feeling a certain way, analyze like, who have you been spending time with, both in person and online? Now, are they a wing or are they a weight? Because that may play into your negativity a little bit too.
That's great feedback. I haven't heard about that or that analogy, and that makes a lot of sense.
And I was like, score one for soccer parent meeting, because everything else was like super, logistics and in all the forms and everything. But that takeaway was really good.
Oh, that is a great takeaway. So to move on to the next one, what do you feel like is a childhood story reflecting why you do what you do now?
Yeah, I've always been a go-getter, and I love learning. So I used to, like, even now, if I walk into the library or Barnes and Noble and just the smell of books, like my soul goes, oh my gosh, there's so many things that you can learn and grow in right now. And I could literally just stay in Barnes and Noble for like a whole day. Like that's my happy place. But at the same time, when I was little, we weren't allowed to watch a lot of TV. So we had a specific amount of time every day that we could watch TV. And we'd save all of our time up until like Friday, and we'd watch, or Saturday, and we just watched like a bunch of cartoons. And so during the week, we had to make up our own fun, essentially. And I think making up those games and doing those things created this like ability to kind of solve problems and use creativity. And that really is kind of how I look at my job today, because that's what I do. People come to us with problems. How do I reach these customers? How do I grow my video on YouTube? How do I reach people on LinkedIn? And we look at the problem, think through the solution, creatively, develop that. And then that's ultimately kind of why I get paid today.
That makes a lot of sense. Comparing that to your story about being creative, strategizing, hey, what can I do that's going to be really fun for me and kind of kill the time.
Yeah, I also learned I'm the oldest of four. So when every time as I've been growing up, I've always been a little bit of a, not necessarily always a take charge person, but I can easily find, like in a matter of chaos, I can easily spot the exit. And so I think that quality, being a type A and oldest child, I've always been in a leadership role. So student council, sorority president in college, like things like that. So it's lent itself well to learning how to lead people, get buy-in, then ultimately kind of like direct people toward an outcome. So even if that meant like in third grade, like, running a little kind of like thing in my neighborhood, there was always some sort of like organization going on, I think, in my life.
That's incredible. I definitely relate to that. And also people telling me you need to be in this position, like not even necessarily, maybe similar for you too, where it's like you maybe didn't say, I want to do this, or I'm going to be in this leadership position, or people looking to me and saying, you need to do that, or I want Allison in that position. And then I'm thinking, oh, what, me? Okay, I guess I'm doing this. Like, this is happening.
Yeah, people are often afraid to tell, and we make it so. We make it so that it's difficult for people to give us feedback because we're scared of the truth. And many times, like, we know deep in the deepest part of us. So like, I knew that I wanted to launch my own thing. I knew that. And it took me a couple of fits and starts to get there. And finally, when I did it, this friend of mine, I said, hey, here's what I'm doing. And he just goes, finally, because like he's over here waiting for me to realize what he already knows. And I think that's true of a lot of people where like we're our own worst critics. And we think that other people are going to be like, no, she's not qualified. But they're over here going, why? What is she waiting for? And then when we finally bring those two worlds together, it's, kind of rewarding for both sides.
That's definitely true. I've needed to learn kind of the opposite in my life, where I'm a go forward. I have an idea, or I have a team of people that have an idea, and I'm like, let's do this. Let's move forward. So I've needed to learn to kind of step back and say, is this really a good decision for everybody? Are we all on the same page? What's the outcome here? What are the results going to be? Is this something we really need to do? Or is this something we can hire somebody to do? It's just starting to ask myself those kind of clarifying questions has been phenomenal to give that space. And I want to move on to the next one. And I also have a best-selling book, so I have a question, but that was for before. Do you have a book? You have
Not
a
yet.
podcast, right? No, you're thinking
working
about
on it. Yeah, working on it.
Really? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So what is it going to be about? Or can you tell us yet?
Yeah, I have a couple of things that are in progress now. One is called the Field Guide to Content Marketing. And so it's the way that all people buy services and products these days is through self-discovery of their own education. And what that means is we no longer want to call and say, hey, company XYZ, let me talk to a salesperson because I don't know anything about the product and I need to learn about that. Like that, we just think that's crazy, but that's how it used to have to happen before the internet because you didn't have access to information. And now since we do, like we research the products, we read the reviews, we talk to people, we watch the videos, we read the blogs, we look at the website. So that's how content marketing works now. And most people are struggling when they think, how do I create content so that I can convert customers? Well, it's really more like a giant symphony. And you have to make sure that all the pieces are in place for you to eventually have like, good music, essentially. So that's one. And then I'm working on a shorter book called The Hardest Thing About Simple. And the hardest thing about simple is really the kind of start slow to go fast. And just because something is simple, just because something is simple doesn't mean it's easy. So I'll say the simplicity of running a marathon is 1 step, 2 step, 1 step, 2 step for 26.2 miles. Is that simple? Yes. Is that hard? Yes. Is simple and easy the same thing? No, because that's not easy. So again, like that's kind of the thinking around when you've got clarity on a lot of the stuff that you can, like you mentioned this earlier, if I just stop and think, I can go faster. And so it's how do you create these moments in your life where you can make things simple so that you can execute, because you can't do complex and hard at the same time. You will just absolutely burn out. So that's kind of the thought behind it.
Mm. And I love all of that you just shared. And to piggyback on what you just said, I think for myself too, I've learned to make sure I'm processing all of those things and not forcing it. So like not moving forward with force, that I'm going to just power through this. And I'm sure a lot of the listeners would relate to this. If you sit down at your computer and you're thinking, I'm going to power through this. I don't really know what I'm doing here, and I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to do this, as opposed to maybe taking that step back and you're just in the shower one day and it comes to you because you've let it marinate and not forced it. That's a big reminder for myself. Speaking for personal experience.
Yeah, a lot of times the advice that comes best is when we hear ourselves say it multiple times, right? But the slowing down and getting the why behind our actions is sometimes difficult, I think, because when we actually come back to it, we don't really have a good why in many cases. Our why might be, well, it just seemed like a good idea. And then we've already told people about it. So then if we take it back, we look like we're some sort of schizophrenic person where we can't make up our mind. And so we're afraid of the backlash of that actually more than, so for instance, when people start a podcast, there's various reasons why you start a podcast. One of them could very well be you just want to get introductions to people in order to grow your valuable network. Okay, that should be a really good outcome, and it's definitely possible. Like you and I wouldn't have met if that wasn't the case in this podcast. However, if you look at I just want to have listener numbers, okay, listener numbers are not a direct correlation to introductions to new people. Your metrics in tracking the success of a podcast, you're going to be grossly disappointed by podcast episode number 12 if you don't have 500 downloads by then. So it's kind of connecting some of those dots so you can say, year one, my goal with the podcast is to lay a good foundation and build 52 new relationships. Year two, it's to grow the listener numbers, and that you have a different strategy to do that. So it's again, stepping back and saying, we need to look at this from a very simple standpoint so we can keep ourselves focused, because focus is actually the biggest antithesis to progress, especially from a marketing standpoint.
And where to focus?
Oh my gosh.
I think that's what you're saying. Where do you direct?
But when people say, this year, I have multiple focuses. And I was like, that's not the definition of focus. You can't have multiple focuses. It's like you just can't do it. It's not possible. Like
you said, you can have one focus and a sympathy leading people to that focus and getting them on the same page. We really aim to do that at Empire Life. We are on Pinterest and YouTube, Twitter, all the places to have the similar branding and symphony of playing the music to lead them to then the podcast or the blog on the website. And we're having, I think it was 220 million visitors a day almost to the website. Yeah, it's really great numbers. That's 7 years, and this is my third company. So it's also looking at, like you said, where's the focus that first year? Getting a beautiful blog might be 1 year of having the template, understanding what we're going to write about, having different articles in the backlog. How many backlinks are we going to have? How are we going to do SEO? And really getting a solid foundation for the blog. And then start answering comments. And just recently, I hired somebody to help me to write the blog, but it's been, 5 years of writing it. So I'm like, this is the foundation. This is the template. This is how many backlinks we have. And I have another person who does SEO when they input the blog. But for the last 5 years, I was the one doing that with different focuses.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah, and then if you have a book coming out, having a blog and a podcast and having built that up for a few years is an incredible resource, because then we can promote our book like that, and it's much more likely to become a bestseller when we have all of those communities. playing that similar music, like you said, or having the symphony about the book.
Yeah.
And I want to, since we're almost out of time, before we hop off, what are the top 3 concepts that you want to leave the audience with, Ali?
Sure. As a marketer and entrepreneur myself, I will say that I see a lot of people, they're confused by this very concept of marketing simply because there's so many things you could do. You Google marketing tips for any type of business and you just get like laundry lists of ideas. So I have boiled it down to what I think is the essence of marketing, and that is connecting people that have problems with valuable solutions in a way that they feel like they've bought it versus they've been sold. That's really the premise of marketing these days. And for that to work, you need to put, especially in a business today, we talked about it previously, but put that human expertise first. You know, there used to be times when we would think a chatbot was cool. And now if a website has a human in the live chat, we're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, I don't want to talk to a chatbot. I want a human. So human first, super, super important in your marketing these days. Secondly, no matter how amazing your marketing ideas are, systems will trump ideas every day. A really, really great idea that's not built into a system for easy execution will fall flat versus a really mediocre idea that is executed to the nines. I've seen that over and over again. And I've seen it when you get tired of your marketing is when your market starts to actually pay attention. So too many times people give up. And so you have to keep executing when you think it's boring, because at that point your audience is like, wow, this is cool. Like, you guys keep showing up, and to you're bored, your audience is like, wow, I can trust them now, right? And then the third one is the roller coaster. So what might work today doesn't necessarily work tomorrow or the day after, but you can't constantly be looking for the newest thing. Like, that roller coaster of looking for the next big win in marketing is going to leave you exhausted. So take some of your budget, attribute it to new and exciting things, and take the majority of your budget and consistently execute where your customers are, because you can't keep taking budget and throwing it around to what you might think is like a big, bet on a winning horse, because that horse is going to change.
Yeah, I love the part too about looking at where your market is, because, for example, when we had our book published in 2021, we weren't getting a lot of likes or shares on Facebook, but we just kept showing up there. But then when I looked at the numbers in the Google metrics, that we were getting the most clicks from Facebook. So I think that's hard too. The Google Analytics, I was trying to think of that word. The Google Analytics, sure. We saw that the most clicks to buy the book, to go to the book website, was from Facebook, although there was like maybe 2 or 3 likes on the actual post. Whereas on Instagram, it was kind of the opposite, where there's a lot of likes and comments, but a lot less clicks to go buy it. So I think there's a back end too that we need to think about when we're dedicating our marketing budget, and not just look at the what are those called? The pretty metrics, or
vanity metrics.
The vanity metrics. That those are great, and those are important to show prestige, or the word expertise, to show that you're an expert. But the back end of it, you have to make money and start scaling your revenue, or that's where your customers are, is who's actually clicking those links and going to buy the product or reading more about the service.
Yeah, definitely.
Did you have something more to add to that?
I think the vanity metrics, the way I like to think about them is you have to look the part. So if you're going to a fancy dinner, you need to look like you belong at the fancy dinner. So that's your outfit, that's your demeanor, that's the way you talk. All of those things are important. But if you go to that dinner and you simply sit in the corner, nobody's going to know that you're there. So there is mechanisms to get your brand out into the marketplace to have those conversations. So the vanity metrics can help you make sure that you're looking the part, but they don't do anything to drive you into the middle of the room.
Wow. Yeah, I love that. I love that analogy. That's a great one. And for everybody listening, we're going to have everything about Ali in the comments down below, and how to get in touch with her. And we'll get you to Ali all the shorts, and we'll have a lot of different shorts, and we're everywhere on Spotify, YouTube. You can find this podcast on our website. And thank you so much for being here, Ali.
Yeah, thanks for having me.